around, you can do that. So the last thing we need to do here is we're going to actually go and put some JavaScript to this form to do the validation. So if you would bring this form up in Visual Studio, and we want to do a little bit here just with vanilla.js as far as figuring out how to work with this form.
If you can give me just a second to pull it up.
Yep.
Yeah, quick question. Are we gonna have to like, are we using vanilla.js for the register form, or are we using like jQuery for the labs we have? Mr. Smith, did you hear me?
Yeah, I heard you. I was just waiting for that. So the lab expectation is that you'll use jQuery, which we'll review on Monday.
All right, so like, unless we want to figure out how to use jQuery, we shouldn't really touch the labs until Monday?
No, you should absolutely be starting them on already. But what I would start with doing is laying out the HTML.
Oh yeah, I already did that.
Yeah.
So just the HTML, or do you want us to start implementing the Bootstrap and all that stuff also?
I would go ahead and start it. Do it with whatever you remember. You know, start the JavaScript and the jQuery. I mean, start the JavaScript and the CSS with using Bootstrap and using jQuery with the stuff you remember. But yes, the expectation is that you use Bootstrap and jQuery. But I just want to go through this example, kind of building back up there to make sure that everybody understands the fundamentals, if that makes sense. What's happening underneath all that.
All right, I'm good, Mr. Smith.
Okay. What about everybody else? I only see one like.
I didn't even see that.
Oh yeah, I'm ready.
I didn't either.
What was the question? What?
Discord?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's go do this thing. So I need to do a few things. I need to make sure that my script doesn't actually run until the page is loaded. So the way I'm going to do that,
prevent default.
So I'm going to say window dot, I think it's on load. Okay, so first I'm going to hook that up, and I'm going to say we want to run this when the page loads. So on that event, we want to write our code. Yeah, I'm going to put that as curly braces around here because this is going to be more than one line of code. So you can do the arrow syntax, the arrow function, you can do it if you only have one line of code, in which case the return statement's implicit, or you can do it with more than one line of code, and then you may have to write the return statement yourself. And that's with curly braces here. Okay, so I'm saying let's respond to the onload event, and that's where we want to run our logic. Okay, what's the next thing I need to do as far as responding to when the form is submitted? Does anybody remember? What's the next thing I need to do? Even if you don't remember the specific syntax.
Function.
Okay, function what?
You know what? I didn't really think that far. I was really not even betting I was right. But function then a variable name. Maybe.
Okay.
This is really hard to dual screen. I can't like look at both.
Would you need to put like EVT inside the function, and then you would start coding within that function?
So I want to listen for, right, when this form is submitted, right? So if I want to listen for that event, what's the first thing I need?
Don't you need? You need to make a variable equal function, and then, right?
Probably not the first thing I want to do. So the first thing I want to do is actually get that DOM element, right? I want to get access to the form element, right? So I can get the access to that by this
with the ID.
Yeah, by that ID. So let's make a variable. We do want to make a variable, but it's not going to be a function. What it'll be is the form. So I want to say, let's get that form element. And I remember somebody said previously something about the $sign. They said that was document dot get element by ID.
That was me.
Yep. So we're going to get it with that, and note in there that I'm not putting the that hash. So get element by ID takes it without adding a hash. Okay. So this is doing it in vanilla.js, and we'll go over we'll tweak this over to jQuery on Monday. So vanilla.js, I want to say I want to get the form object. That's the way I do that. Once I've got the form, now I can actually do the function, right? So which event do I want to hook it up to? I want to hook it up to the submit event, right? So remember that starts with on, so it's on submit. I'm going to say on submit, let's give that a function. Okay, so here I might say EVT on that function, then we want to do some logic. You with me so far?
Yep.
Yep.
So we're saying wait to do all of this logic until the page is loaded. And so we've got another function inside of here. And so we say get the form and then listen for when the form is submitted. Okay, so when the form is submitted, that's where I'm going to provide the handler to actually do the logic. So here I need to get the values that the user has actually entered. So the first value on the form is their name, right? So I want to get their name. So let's say we have a variable here, which is their name. And what do I need to set that to? What do I need?
A string?
A string? Like blue?
Would that be another get element by ID?
It would be another get element by ID.
For the input of
for
name?
the input, right? So what's the idea of that input?
Name.
Name.
Okay, so the idea of the input is name. Now, what does get element by ID return? Do you remember what that returns?
It returns the element.
Returns the element, right? But what do I want? I want the string, right? I want the value of that, right?
Oh, dot inner HTML.
Dot value.
Dot value. Dot value. Inner HTML would be all the HTML that's inside of it, but I'm working with a form field, right? So value is the way you get it from an input.
Okay.
Okay, so I want the value of that input. Okay, now, quick question: is that a string, or is that a number, or what is it? Is value what data type is value?
String.
String. Okay, so remember, value is always string, right? So sometimes you may need to call parse float on that to turn it into a number. Okay. So that's the name. Let's go on to the next one. So the next one would be the email. So const email, and that should be basically the same dealio. So document.getElement by ID. Let's get the email address. Let's get the email field and dot value. Let's say I want to get the subject next. I'm going to skip over the zip code. Subject is equal to document.getElement by ID, and that's going to be the subject. And by the way, text area is the same thing, even though it's not an input. It's b.value. So here I want to get the message. So with me so far, we've got all the values from the front end.
Yep.
Okay. So the next thing I want to do is check that those values are valid. So generally you want to start with the first one on the list and kind of work your way down. So I'm going to write an if statement for the name, right? How do I check that the name is valid or invalid? How do I, what would be an invalid name?
Empty.
Empty, okay. What else could be an invalid name?
Numbers.
Something.
Something with numbers.
Something with numbers. Let's keep it simple and let's just say numbers are okay. Empty is the only thing I want to check for, right? So if I want to check for name, what if I say if name? When is that executed? When is that true?
When is if name?
Yep.
It has to be filled out, right, and submitted.
Right. So they'd have to have something there that's not empty string, right?
Oh,
So if
Are you looking for the not equal to sign?
or it double equals or
this is just the thing where it's falsy if it's an empty string, isn't it?
Yes, this is. This is a falsy thing. This is a truthy falsy thing. So let's make a place on the form real quick because I just realized we don't have a place to output the values. So I need a place for the results. So let's give this like ID results so that I can have a place to spit out messages. So I'm going to start with that, and we're going to say let's get the results. Const results is equal to document dot get element by ID, and we want to get that results element. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say here, if the name has been provided, we're going to say dot inner HTML is equal to name is valid. Okay, let's try that real quick. So what we can see is, oh, I need to make that not required. Make the zip code not required so I can test it easier. So what we can see here, first of all, if I hit send, you'll notice that it's redirecting to another page, right?
Yeah.
How can I stop it from redirecting to another page?
Don't you change the button event if it's something?
What can I do to keep it from going to another page? Somebody said it earlier.
EVT prevent default on the button click.
Yep, but it's on the submit.
Okay.
It's not on the click. It's on the submit. So here we're in the submit event. So I'm going to say EVT dot prevent default. And I might say let's maybe do this last. I'll put this at the last thing I do in here for now. So I'm going to put in there EVT prevent default, and that'll keep it from going to another page. You see that?
Yeah.
So let's say if I leave it blank right now, nothing happens. You can see if I put a name in there, it says name is valid, right? And I could do this as if else. So I could say here the name is valid or the name is invalid. Right? So if I leave it blank, it says the name is invalid. If I put in a value there, it says the name is valid. So you can see what's happening with the truthy falsy trick. I'm not saying equals this, equals that, because if I was really going to check this and be thorough, I'd actually need to check several of those falsy values, not just checking if it was empty string. I might also need to check if it's null, for instance, or undefined. But doing it this way goes ahead and checks all those values as well. Cool.
I'm guessing I'm having trouble with following along on how it's actually working with detecting those values without actually setting or like setting it to say, oh, if it equals this, then don't do this, if you get what I'm saying.
Okay, so we've got that there, right? So I've got a basic check for the name. What about the next one? What about the email? So let's make this if email is valid, email is invalid. Okay. So somebody tell me without running this, what's going to happen if I put in an email address or not? Or a name or not? Is there a bug here?
Yes.
So Michael, explain to me what the bug is.
I mean, if I can.
Yeah, go for it.
Like if they're both empty, it's just going to say email is invalid. It's not going to say name is invalid because you're completely resetting the results.
Right. Because I'm doing equals an assignment. You completely replace everything there. So if I just send this as is, it just says email is invalid. It doesn't. It will go through and run this line of code, but then it will also come through and write that line of code, which means that it's going to replace it with that. Okay. So what could I do to make it not replace it? Maybe add on to it.
Plus equals.
I could do a plus equals. Where do I need to do a plus equals? Do I need to do that on all 4 of these or just some of them?
Just the email ones.
Just the email ones?
I would say put it on all of them because if, let's just say that there is a problem with the name and the email, then, well, it depends on if they execute them in order. But if you resubmit the form, it may change it.
So in this case, you get lucky, and it does work if I do that. You know, it does turn out to work if I only do the pluses here. But what if I come through and I change the code and I want to run these in a different order?
You'll have to switch. I
have to switch to pluses. I don't want there to be a dependency like that, because the dependency is kind of buried in here deep in the bottom of the if, right? So
to eliminate and clear it out each time we submit it, or I don't know, maybe that's done by default, because otherwise you're just going to get repeated errors. It's not going to clear it out. So above the if statements or at the very top, it would be results inner HTML equals empty string.
You're right. So if I keep clicking send here, if it's plus equals everywhere, yeah, it's going to keep adding on to it. So you're right. I do need to clear it out. So let's say here, we're going to say that, set it to empty string. With me so far? Okay. How can we get that to appear on 2 separate lines? Because right now they're appearing on the same line.
The escape character.
Escape character?
Isn't that what they're called? The /n?
/n?
That would be the new line character.
No, maybe not.
Remember, I'm writing out HTML, right? What happens with white space in HTML? It gets compacted down to a single space, right? So that new line just gets treated as a space, which is why there's now a space between those two. So I could instead do BR, right? That would work. BR would work because it is HTML. But remember I said BR is kind of a smell when it comes to responsive design, right?
Yeah.
So the way to get them to appear on top of each other is just use a div. Because this, if I wanted to come back, if I put them out as divs, by default they'll be stacked. But I could easily make the results section, I could easily make it a flex container and make them horizontal if I needed them to be horizontal this way.
Out of curiosity, why are you putting the div and all those things inside the quotes?
Because what I'm outputting, right? This can I put HTML directly into JavaScript? Is this valid syntax?
No.
So it's not. It's you can't kind of intermingle those. If I try to run that, you'll see it says uncaught syntax exception when it gets down here. We'll say I can't do that. Right? I don't know what to do with this because it's trying to treat it as a less than sign. So that's why I need the whole thing to be in quotes. Is because I need JavaScript to treat it as a string. Because it doesn't know, JavaScript doesn't really know HTML. So I can do that, and we can put a div around all of these messages. Is everybody with me so far?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we've got a good start here. So the next thing I want to do is we've got kind of a, we can see whether the value is invalid or invalid. How do I then say, okay, I want to allow the user to submit the form if all of the fields are valid, but not submit the form if any field is invalid?
Create a variable that
Okay.
can be changed.
A variable that can be changed. Okay.
That's a Boolean.
Okay. How do I declare that variable? You're right. Let
is valid. That's what we did last year.
Okay.
And then I think you equal it to false, right?
So I'm going to assume for the beginning that the form is invalid, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then on the if statements, each one, depending on if it's valid or not, you're gonna you're gonna change it to true or false.
So do I want to prevent the default if it's valid or if it's invalid?
Invalid.
Invalid. So what do I need to put in this if here?
If
Not is valid.
Not is valid. Okay. If it's not valid, then we want to prevent the default, right? Okay, so we started as always being false, right? Okay, so that means it's never going to submit, right? Good so far. Okay, so now you're saying something about I need to do something in the if statements?
yeah, in the if statements, you're gonna reassign that variable depending on if it's true or false.
Okay, so in here, what do I need to set invalid to?
True.
Okay, so let's set it to true. Do I need to set it in this other case as well?
You can. Doesn't,
Okay.
I don't think it hurts it.
All right, let's give that a try. Something's happening, right? It's letting my form go through. See that?
This is why I don't participate in class. I'm always wrong.
No, you're fine. You're on the right track. You're on the right track.
This
So-
is where I'm at in my code, so like I actually like I don't know where I'm at
Right.
either. So
So if I submit it, watch really closely the console. Do you see a little red flash?
Yeah, I was gonna say you declared the variable pretty low, but I thought it was hoisted, so I didn't think to.
So remember, let is not hoisted, right?
Oh,
If you declare it with var, it'll be hoisted, but it's not hoisted because I've declared it with let. So what I'm seeing there is I'm seeing a syntax error that's just flashing up for a second and then going away, right?
So would you have to declare it up there with the other variables?
Yeah, I will. One trick that you want to use as you're testing forms, put prevent default as the first line. And if you do that, then you can actually see the message. It won't forward to the next screen, so we can see this message. You see that? So if I prevent it from submitting all the time, then I can see that error. So yes, so it's telling me what? It's telling me that it cannot access the isValid, and that tells me I need to go put it up earlier. So where should I put this? Give me a line number.
82.
82? 82 is probably pretty good. So declare it up here. All right, now let's try it. So we get name is invalid. We get both of these as being invalid. Let me go ahead and comment out that line up there so it can submit again. Okay, so we see that it doesn't submit if I leave the form completely blank, right? What happens if I just enter a name but nothing else, right?
It'll submit.
It'll submit, right? Okay. So right now it's only considering the name, right? Okay. Well, let's follow along with the track that we have. Maybe that means that we need to add this to the other two blocks. So I need to do it for both name and email, right? All right, so let's say we do that. I can see that it doesn't go through. If I put in a name, it still doesn't go through. And then I put in my email, and it does go through, right? So it didn't work it didn't work in those cases. Is that good? Have I checked for both fields?
No.
Why not?
Get rid of the full name.
Get rid of the full name, right? So I've got to check all the cases. I've got to say, what happens if I fill in one field? What happens if I fill in the first field, the second field? Or what happens if I fill in both? So if I just fill in the second field and not the first, it actually, as it turns out, it doesn't matter what I do with this first field, right? Because whatever I set the first field to, it's going to either be set to true or false, right? It doesn't matter if I set it invalid or valid here. Okay, so how do I fix that problem?
Initialize is valid to true.
Okay.
And then remove setting is valid to true in our if statements.
Okay, so why? Explain to me why would I want to initialize it to true? Why would I choose true over false?
So that whenever they get something wrong, the whole thing is wrong.
Okay. So it's this idea that I start by making my assumption, right? This is my initial assumption about the form, right? So here I'm assuming to begin with that the form is invalid, right? That's kind of mean. That's like assuming somebody's guilty before I've proven them guilty, right? So I don't want to assume that it's invalid until I know that it's invalid. So we're going to start by assuming that it is valid. And you could think about this way. What if I have a form that has no inputs? Is that form with no inputs, is it a valid form? Is it valid or is it invalid?
It's valid.
Is valid, right? So your form can only be invalid if there is a field that is set to an invalid value, right? So we need to start with true, and then you're right. Why do I need to take these trues out?
Because the form is already true if it's passed through.
So specifically what happens in this case? If I set it to true here,
it would reset the name false.
Yeah,
Right.
it was false before and go back to being true.
Right. So it gets rid of it ignores the checks. So the only case where I want to set it is in the case where it's invalid. Right. So I start by setting it to true, and I only change it if it actually needs to change, right? If it actually needs to go to false. Okay. So I've got that. Okay. Now, let's say in here, so that works as long as I didn't save. That's why. So it gives me an error if I don't fill in all those values. It's going to work now for all of those cases. Now, a lot of times on forums, do we tell users whether or not a particular field is valid?
Yes.
Sometimes we do, right? Sometimes we might tell them it's valid.
Well, we'll tell them it's invalid.
But we usually tell them just that it's invalid. So I really want to get rid of these cases here, right? I just want to tell them which fields are invalid. So for instance here, if I say Paul Smith, it's just going to, oh, I didn't save. If I just say Paul Smith, it's only going to tell me that I didn't enter a value into the email address field. With me?
Yep.
Okay, so I need that. Now I have these empty ifs that aren't doing anything. Does that look kind of ugly?
Yeah.
Is everybody with me? That looks kind of ugly.
Yeah.
So maybe I just want to do maybe I just want to have the if by itself. So can I just cut that out?
No.
No.
You have to put an exclamation mark in front of the name and email.
Okay, so we got to put an exclamation mark there, and I'll do the same thing with this. So what I'm saying if there's not a name, if they don't enter a name, then do this. If they don't enter an email, then do that.
Mr. Smith, I might have missed it when you described what the exclamation point is doing there, but like, I'm having trouble with the one that says is valid down there. What's that? What does the exclamation point do? It means it's a false. It's faulty.
Read it as not. So not is valid or not email. That's how we read it.
Is that the same thing as saying is valid is false?
No. It is because is valid is only true or false. It is in that sense because it's a Boolean. It's not like this. I'm not saying is name equals false. Okay. It is equivalent down here because is valid is true or false, but it's not equivalent in general. So what's the problem here?
You're not comparing it to be false. You're just trying to see if it's an empty string.
Right. Is name ever false?
No.
Is there a way for me to get name to be false?
No.
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 Wouldn't that still evaluate because it's only a double equal sign?
See? So you're saying double equal sign? What do you mean would it still evaluate?
Oh, when
It's
you have a
still-
double equal sign, doesn't it convert that string to a falsy or true value before it compares, so it would still work?
Well, look at what's happening. If I run it with that code, is it telling me that the name is invalid?
No.
Okay. And same way here, if I leave it blank, is it telling, well, there it tells me that. Yeah, so it is actually, as it turns out, it is doing a conversion.
I thought you had to have quotes around false for it to like match up. Maybe I'm just looking
I
at
don't
it
know.
wrong.
But
So it's evaluating the word false to be false, therefore it's true. So for
well,
anything
that would
false,
only be the case. The only case where the word false, I'd have to write it like this. That's the case where the word false gets evaluated that way.
Must be what I'm thinking.
Yeah. But it looks like there it is turning this into a Boolean. So it is treating that a truthy or a falsy value in that case, which is kind of interesting. I didn't expect that to go that direction, but it did.
Yeah, because it will convert it. It'll only do an exact comparison if you do a triple equals sign.
Yeah. So I think you're right. You're right. So
semantically, the not symbol is still better though.
Yeah. So for sure, yeah, absolutely do it this way. But Daniel, does that do you feel like your question's been answered there? The idea is that it's not that there's not a value there.
I'll get it eventually.
Okay. Don't think of it as equals equals false. Okay. Don't think of it as equals equals true or equals equals false. Think about it. Is this value, would I treat it as true or would I treat it as, is it a truthy value or is it a falsy value, right?